The story kicks off with our main guy, Chamber, getting told by two girls that he's basically just dead weight now. They've been hanging around for a while, just hoping he'd finally show up with some epic new skills. But since that wasn't happening, he started dragging them all down. They flashed him a fake smile and promised they were right there with him as the sun came up. The two girls rushed over and clung to Jane, telling him Chamber was ditching the party, which left him totally confused as he asked why. Plus, there was that wild excuse Martha totally cooked up. For adventurers, skills are the only thing that matters, and since everyone gets one at 15, that single power basically decides your whole life. His Chamber skill leveled up, but it's honestly just a totally useless power. She told him that she's got insane fire magic, and Naru has holy powers, while Jane is the real hero. Chamber definitely felt like he didn't belong at that party, so a super worried Jane asked her where he was even heading. The two girls totally ignored him and told Jane to stop moping over that guy and just move on already. Still, our hero was super worried about his buddy and kept wondering if he was doing okay. At the same time, Chamber was busy holding his own in a wild fight against a massive enemy. He ran into a few monsters out in the wild, but he realized he couldn't even land a scratch on them yet. He finally realized this was going to be way tougher than he thought. Normally, his only job was to be the team's meat shield, taking all the hits and distracting the monsters while everyone else did the actual fighting. He quickly shook his head to snap out of it, remembering he wasn't in the dawn anymore. He was done with that squad, and since he was finally on his own, he charged straight into the monsters. The monster swings its massive club, but he catches the blow right on his blade. He kept telling himself he had to keep his cool and not freak out. He stayed totally chill, then in a total flash, he just sliced right through the guy. But it wasn't over yet, and as another guy tried to sneak up from behind, he blocked that hit too. Then he just sliced the monster's head clean off in a total flash. After crushing his enemies, he caught his breath and realized he actually had the power to pull this off all by himself. Out of nowhere, another monster jumps out and smashes him right in the face. He realized right then that this was the first guy he didn't actually take out for good. He tried to scramble back up, but the monster shut him down before he could even move, and just snatched him right by the face. That beast was totally ready to finish him off for good. Right then, those two girls flashed right back into his mind. They were always acting like he was trash and calling him a total burden who was good for nothing. He gripped his sword tight, but those voices in his head just wouldn't shut up. He kept yelling at them to shut their mouths, and using all that pure rage, he squeezed out every last bit of power and drove his sword right into the monster. Now that the fight's over, he's totally fuming because he almost died to such a weak little monster. He just lay there on the ground, gasping for air because his body was totally frozen. He looked up at the sky and realized this was really how he was going to go out. Everything was starting to turn into a total blur for him. Out of nowhere, a screen flashed in front of him saying he leveled up, and his health and mana were instantly back to full. He was totally clueless about what was happening, but suddenly he could finally move his body again. Plus, all the cuts on his face were totally healed up. His head was spinning with a million questions, like what was up with that level-up voice he just heard? Why was a glowing screen just floating in front of his face? And what did HP and MP even mean? He was totally lost. He had a gut feeling that all those numbers were actually tracking his real power levels. Right then, it finally clicked that his secret power was actually leveling up. He stared at the floating screen and saw his stats were way higher, making him wonder if he was actually getting stronger in real life. It finally clicked. Leveling up completely refills his HP and MP, which is exactly why his wounds keep disappearing. His attack, defense, and speed all shot through the roof, making this new skill a total game changer. Knowing he could just keep getting stronger made him jump with hype once he realized his potential. Turns out his skill wasn't just some useless joke. From that moment on, he's been non-stop fighting every monster that crosses his path. He could totally feel that level-up power kicking in. He felt way lighter than before, and swinging his sword was suddenly a total breeze. Plus, since his mana just shot up, he can finally use crazy magic that was totally off-limits before, and with all this power, he absolutely wrecked the orc that used to give him so much trouble. He just hit level 4, basically proving his theory that the more monsters he takes out, the more he levels up. But later, while he was just chilling at his new base, Rumble, he had no clue why his levels were suddenly stuck and wouldn't budge. He's been slaying monsters non-stop for ages, but his level is totally stuck. He was totally stuck, racking his brain for why his level wasn't going up. But he had absolutely no clue what was wrong. He was dead set on leveling up, and with that one goal driving him, he finally crashed for the night. The next day, he hits up the Adventurers Guild to see if there are any cool quests waiting for him. But honestly, every single one of them was just straight up mid. He asked the receptionist Nyako for a solid quest and tried to play it smooth by telling her those cat ears were totally adorable. That just made her even angrier, and she snapped that she's actually a noble tiger. She totally snapped, yelling that quests are first come, first served, and he should definitely know the rules after being in the Rumble for months. Suddenly, he heard the whole guild starting to go absolutely wild, and this girl was literally getting kicked out of her own team. Her teammates screamed that her power was total trash, and they were officially done with her. Looking at that chamber, he couldn't help but remember when his own squad called him a total burden and kicked him out. Her teammates were dying to see where a total loser like her would end up, so they just ditched her right there. The girl tried to jump in and stop them, but it didn't matter one bit. Standing there all by herself, she started getting in her feelings and wondered if everyone was actually right about her. Chamber walked right up to her and told her he totally got what she was going through. He told her he knew a way better spot for her, and get this, since she had nowhere else to go, he told her she could just crash at his place. The entire guild was left in total shock after hearing that news. The girl was totally dying of embarrassment, while he was just super confused because he didn't mean it like that at all. Her friends cracked up because she'd already found someone to look after her. She warned Chamber that he was about to see just how trash her divine message skill really was. He was dying to see what that skill could actually do. Before heading out, the women teased them, saying they were actually a perfect match since they both had such boring vibes. A bit later, the two of them were just chilling at a tavern. He orders some drinks for them, but she looks super uneasy about the whole thing. He told her he'd just been kicked out too, and honestly, whenever things go wrong, he thinks a cold drink is the only way to fix it. He didn't pressure her at all, telling her that if she wasn't down to drink, he'd just finish both of them himself. She just chuckled and said she was totally down to grab a drink with him. He introduces himself and tells her that he's also out here adventuring all by himself. She introduced herself as Ali and let him know she was actually a D-ranked adventurer. Chamber explained that while he's technically a C rank, going solo makes him more like a G rank, and hearing that made her totally freak out and admit she admits that even though she's a priestess, the only magic she knows is a weak, lesser heal, and she starts crying because she thinks she's completely worthless. Chamber totally got why she felt that way, because honestly, he felt just as useless as she did. Out of nowhere, Ale starts acting super weird and shouts that Chamber is only 30 points away from leveling up. Once you deliver that message, just stop right there. She finally snapped back to reality and started freaking out like crazy. She kept saying sorry because her skill makes her blurt out things before she can even think. She was totally dying of embarrassment and kept trashing her skill for being so useless, while he just stood there without a single clue what was going on. But then it all started to click once he heard her talking about leveling up and gaining experience points. He finally figured out what her power was really all about. He snatched her up and told her straight up that he really needed her. Just as the sun started rising, Martha booted another teammate from the squad because he was way too weak even with a useful skill. But right as he tried to draw his sword for a final stand, she beat him to it and set off a huge explosion right behind his back. She warned him that next time she's playing for keeps, and the guy took off running for his life. Naru was just vibing in the back and having a blast. But Jane was nothing like the rest of them. He called them out and said they were both being way too mean. The girls just kept saying they needed the right crew to handle whatever was coming at dawn. Jane was just sitting there, wondering how 3 of her teammates had already been kicked out of the squad. He noticed Martha and Nauru acting like they were untouchable just because of their powers, and he wondered if having skills really messes with your head that much. His squad's rank was shooting up, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was totally off as he missed the good times with Chamber. He started wondering if that was the reason everything felt so different all of a sudden. He just couldn't accept that Don didn't have a spot for him anymore. He was dying to know what he was even doing at this point. After that, Chamber and Ale headed back out to keep their big adventure going. While he was duking it out with the monster, she stayed back and kept him covered. He totally crushed those monsters. He thanked her for the help, and it turns out these 2 outcasts are officially teaming up to see how they do as a duo. He's been grinding solo for so long that it's actually wild to see him finally teaming up with someone for a quest again. But as he kept on beating that monster down, he could totally feel himself getting way stronger, and it was all thanks to his level-up skill. Once he wiped them all out, Ailey was totally blown away by his power and started hyping him up like crazy. He was honestly just hyped to finally show off in a fight and get some major props from a girl. That level-up skill was a total lifesaver, letting him get way stronger just by farming XP from every monster he takes down. Then we have Ale, whose skill is Divine Revelation, but it's actually way more complicated than it sounds. These divine messages basically leaked all the info on everyone standing nearby. She already gave him the heads up on his level progress back at the tavern, and that info was a total lifesaver for him. He does the math and realizes that every single goblin he takes out is worth 3 experience points. Plus, every time he levels up, the amount of XP he needs to hit the next one gets way bigger. So back in the now, he's convinced that with the goblins he just smashed, he's finally ready to hit that next level. But out of nowhere, Ali calls him out and grabs his hand. He was totally caught off guard and asked her what she was even doing. She stopped him right there and pointed out that his arm was totally busted. She offered to use her magic to patch him right up. Right as she's about to make her move, a notification pops up saying he just leveled up. That just proved his big brain plan was 100% right. He was feeling pretty proud of himself. But Ale started losing it, screaming in total shock at the state of his arms. Her arm injury just healed up all on its own without her even doing a single thing. He was totally chill since it was just a side effect of leveling up, but then it hit him that he'd never done this in front of anyone before, and he definitely had some serious explaining to do. Later that night, while they're chilling by the campfire, he finally spills all the secrets about his crazy skill. Every time he crushes a monster, he stacks up XP to level up and boost his stats. She was shocked a skill like that even existed, and he totally agreed. But she admitted she was super jealous since her own power was basically useless for adventuring. Since they were already on the topic, he asked her what actually made her want to become an adventurer. She looked him right in the eye and said she wanted revenge. Hearing her say that totally caught him off guard. She told him the whole story about how it all started back when she was just a little kid. She was the second daughter in a family of 4, and since her merchant parents were always traveling for work, her sister, who was 7 years older, helped them out, while she was just left behind with family friends. It started out like any other boring day when she waved her family goodbye and waited for them to come back home. They never made it home because a group of thieves jumped them on the road and took them out. After losing her family, she was sent to an orphanage and totally shut herself away, only thinking about why her sweet family had to suffer like that. As time went on, her heart just filled up with nothing but pure hate. That's the whole reason she became an adventurer. She's on a mission to finally get revenge for her family. Chamber was totally speechless, and she knew he was probably losing his mind after hearing everything she just dropped on him. But she just flashed a smile and told him all that drama was ancient history. It finally clicked that since she was the only one left, her sweet family wouldn't want her wasting her entire life just chasing down revenge. Anyway, she was positive those bad guys were already on every wanted poster and suffering big time by now. All she really wanted was to be a legendary adventurer. But then she brought it up all over again. He told her it was just a total fantasy since she was way too weak to pull it off. But Chamber wasn't having any of that at all. He flashed a huge grin and promised that the two of them were going to be the best adventurers ever. She was left standing there in total shock. Once they finished eating, Ailey just sat there with her eyes locked right on him. Then she asked him about his past and what actually made him want to be an adventurer. He gets all nervous and asks if they really have to talk about it, but she says it's only fair for him to spill since she already did. He realized she was right and finally told her the real reason he became an adventurer. We jump back to when he was a little kid, watching Jane absolutely wreck someone in a sword fight. Everyone's jaws dropped when this 10-year-old kid actually took down a grown-up adventurer. And even though the guy was low rank, they all started calling him a total genius. Chamber stayed right on his tail and challenged him to a straight-up sword fight. Even after 33 whole fights, he still couldn't land a single hit on the guy. Jane told him to just quit because he didn't have the talent, and hard work wouldn't change a thing. But even though Chamber knew she was right, he still refused to back down. He screamed at the top of his lungs that he had to keep moving forward. His #1 rule was to never back down, no matter how much people told him to quit. Seeing how fired up he was, Jane was low-key impressed and finally spoke up. He said that never giving up is basically a talent all on its own. After that day, they became total bros, and Chamber swore he'd become the world's greatest adventurer, even planning to surpass a natural talent like Jane. He snapped back to reality and confessed he just acted on a whim. But Ailey actually loved his story and wondered if this was what a real rivalry felt like, making him hope they could. Back at Jane's party, another member just got kicked out, and he stormed out of the room looking totally fuming. The two girls didn't care one bit and just straight up called him useless too. Right at that moment, Jane bursts into the room and catches everyone off guard. He asked how many people had been kicked out, and even though the guy was clearly trying his best, the girls just laughed and said he wasn't even on their level. She even claimed that no amount of hard work can ever make up for a total lack of talent. Jane straight up bragged that nobody could ever beat him in a sword fight. He knew he wasn't just born lucky since he actually put in the work, and that Chamber proved that talent isn't everything. Since he and those two just couldn't see eye to eye on this, he announced right then and there that the Akatsuki was officially finished. Both of them were totally shocked and started demanding answers. Why would he bail now when Akatsuki was about to hit A rank, and even S rank was right there for the self-proclaimed best party ever? Jane admitted he definitely had the skills, but he felt like that wasn't nearly enough. And when they asked who his new partner would be, he totally stunned them by saying but first, he wanted to hit the reset button and start his journey over all by himself. Just like that, he left them totally hyped to become the #1 adventurers in all of Scratch 2. We jump back to Chamber while he's hanging out at a tavern. Ale snuck up right behind him and scared the absolute life out of him. She was drunk again and kept forcing him to drink more, when suddenly her skill just kicked in out of nowhere. She told him he only needs 60 more XP to finally hit the next level. As she finally woke up, he realized her skills were totally carrying him through everything. He started crunching the numbers to see how much grinding he needed for 60 more XP before calling them out for another round. She kept pushing him to grab a drink until he finally gave in, and he was honestly shocked by how much she could drink. But as soon as he mentioned it, she went totally silent. They went totally quiet and just started bawling their eyes out. He totally freaked out thinking he'd messed up, but as he tried to explain he didn't mean it that way, she actually apologized for crying. She just told him that grabbing drinks together was actually a total blast. She'd been dead weight for her team for way too long, but grabbing drinks with him after the quest finally made her feel like a legit adventurer. Chamber just laughed and told her she was the one who actually saved him when he hit rock bottom after getting kicked out, so he really wanted to thank her. But she was already totally passed out. He just looked her way and flashed a massive smile. A little while later, the two of them headed back out to keep their journey going. He was totally shocked to see her so hyped up after she drank way too much the other day. Right then, he spots a whole squad of goblins lurking in the woods. He whipped out his sword in a flash, ready to take those monsters down. He starts dropping them one by one, but a whole new wave is already swarming in from behind. He didn't even care about that, and just kept swinging his sword like a total beast. Ale could totally hold her own in a fight too, so the two of them decided to just keep pushing forward. After totally wrecking all those monsters, they finally stopped for a second to catch their breath. Ale was still totally shook from facing that massive wave of monsters, while Chamber was just relieved they actually made it out alive. They held it down together, even though it was just the two of them. Suddenly, a level-up notification pops up, and he's totally blown away when he realizes they actually took down that many enemies. But then he spots this super weird icon right on top of the veil and starts wondering what the heck is going on. A notification popped up, letting him know he finally learned how to form a party. He just stood there, looking totally clueless. He'd never seen anything like this in his life, and when he checked the info, it showed him exactly who was available to join his squad, and Ale was sitting right at the very top of that list. He saw a little arrow right next to her name, and the second he clicked it, a confirmation window popped up. She asks him if he's down to let her join his party. He still didn't really get it, since they were technically already in a party anyway, so he just went for it and smashed that confirm button. But then he realized he couldn't just make a huge choice like this all by himself. He pulled her aside and, totally nervous, asked if she'd team up with him, and he was freaking out so much he couldn't even look them in the eye. But when he looked her way, she was just standing there, looking totally clueless. She told him they were already a team, and he agreed that she was 100% right. He actually wanted to make their team official and finally go all in. Before he could even finish, she blurted out yes instantly, totally shocking him as she reminded him of his promise that they'd become the ultimate adventurers together. So after all that, she was finally down to officially join his team. He was hyped to hear that, so they just kept pushing forward. He smashed that confirm button and officially added her to his squad. He was totally confused since nothing changed, but he figured it had to be a big deal if the system gave it its own special feature. Ale called them over and told them to keep moving now that they were finally an official team. He was totally down, and since there was still plenty of daylight left, he headed straight for the new forest. As they headed into the forest, monsters started popping up everywhere, so Chamber handled the fighting while Ale backed him up with her healing magic. Now that they're finally a team, he can feel them starting to click perfectly. After wrecking a whole pack of monsters, he started grabbing all the magic stones they dropped as loot. They knew taking this back to the guild would score them some serious cash. Then out of nowhere, that level-up voice rings out again, and this time, it's different. Ale heard it too, and now both of them were totally weirded out. Turns out she's the one who leveled up, and her HP and MP are totally maxed out again. She had no clue why her body felt so weird or why a voice was talking in her head, but Chamber was losing it because she just leveled up exactly like he did. He finally realized that teaming up let his friends level up too, and he wondered if this was the real secret power of the party system. He tried to scan her stats real quick, but she was totally clueless about what he even meant. Suddenly, her stat window popped up right in her face, totally blowing her mind while he started checking out all her levels. He told her the big news. She actually leveled up. She was totally blown away and asked if his skills were doing all this, so he explained how stats work and how they get even crazier every time he levels up. She was so hyped and asked if she really got stronger, and he told her she was 100% right. She was totally hyped and started celebrating, but then she noticed there was actually even more to it. Suddenly, a message popped up letting her know she finally unlocked the light arrow. She was losing her mind with excitement because she went from only being able to heal to finally using attack magic, and Chamber was super hyped for her. She finally got her hands on an attack spell, so they headed straight out to see what it could really do. She takes aim at the tree right in front of her. She aimed her wand and let a delight arrow fly. He pulls it off and nails the tree perfectly. The arrow blasted a hole right through the tree, and Chamber was totally blown away. Ale was jumping up and down like crazy, totally hyped that she actually used an attack spell. Right then, he spotted a bunch of enemies hiding in the grass and immediately shouted for her to watch out. Turns out, a massive swarm of goblins was lurking right behind that tree. He knew things were going south fast and screamed for everyone to get out of there. She was stuck right there while those goblins were literally right on her heels. There were so many of them that he wondered if the noise drew them out or if he just walked straight into their territory. The two of them are sprinting for their lives while those goblins stay right on their heels. They were getting swarmed from every single angle. The two of them totally wrecked every monster that tried to stop them. A massive wave of them was still charging straight for the group. A goblin catches up to Vale and lunges straight for her bag. Chamber told her she needed to hurry up and ditch all her gear. She grabbed her gear and just chucked the bag behind her. Suddenly, every single goblin turned and stared right at that bag. Seeing everyone totally distracted by the loot, he chucked his bag in too, so they could both make their move and bolt right out of the forest. They finally burst out of the woods and stopped for a second to catch their breath. They realized the goblins had finally stopped chasing them once they made it past the woods. They headed straight back to Rumble to tell the Adventurer Guild exactly what went down. Back at the guild, they told the receptionist the whole story, and she was completely blown away that something so wild happened in the Noi forest. But then she spots another woman just standing right there by the stairs. She told Chamber to tail that lady and follow her right up the stairs. The lady led him straight up the stairs and into a room. And the second he steps through that door, this mysterious guy started things off by apologizing for calling him so out of the blue. But he had something major he needed to get off his chest. Chamber was totally confused and asked if he was really waiting for him, and he replied by telling him he actually had a huge favor to ask. But first, he introduced himself as the guy running the whole guild. Surinui was the manager, but even after hearing that, Chambers still couldn't wrap his head around what a guy like him would ever want from him. The manager told him Don's hero party was super close to ranking up, And since Chamber was in the squad, he had some questions he wanted to ask him about them. Chamber balled up his fist, totally fed up, and snapped that he wasn't even in that party anymore. Plus, their rank was still exactly where he'd left it. Then the bank manager changed the subject and told him he'd heard he was absolutely crushing it lately. He told him to chill out and stop being so nervous because he just needed a hand with a case he was working on. Then he told him the spot he needed to check out was the Forest of New. He just reported a massive swarm of goblins, so now the manager wants him to figure out why they're all gathered there. He told him to go during the day since goblins are way more active at night, meaning he'd run into way fewer of them. The guild had a bad feeling that a massive king goblin was actually lurking in those woods. The manager warned him that if he ever ran into the Goblin King, he needed to get out of there fast, because that monster is insanely powerful. Chamber knew this easy job was actually super dangerous, but the manager kept acting like it was just a boring survey. Later, he and Ale headed back into the forest, and she could tell he was totally on edge. She asks what's on his mind, so he admits he's worried about her since this mission is way too dangerous, but she gets annoyed and asks if he thinks she's just dead weight. She reminded him they were at a party now, so she was sticking by his side no matter what happened. He didn't say another word, and Ailey was totally pumped to keep digging for answers. Suddenly, he spots a massive goblin standing right in his way, but what really blew his mind was that he was actually staring at a goblin swordsman. This beast was way bigger and stronger than any normal goblin, leading its pack like a total mini-boss. They both scrambled behind a bush while he quickly filled her in on the whole situation. She was super impressed by how much he knew about these monsters and asked if he'd ever actually fought one before. He told them he hadn't, but he was sure they were strong enough now. They knew they could handle it, so the two of them jumped out of hiding and got ready to take those goblins down. Hale made the first move and fired off a glowing light arrow. She nailed that goblin swordsman right in the eye. That wasn't enough to take it down, but Chamber already knew that, so he rushed in and started swinging his sword. He took the goblin swordsman's head clean off with just one massive swing. With their leader out for the count, the rest of the goblins were totally freaking out. Chamber and Ale didn't waste a second, jumping right back into the fight while the enemies were still totally dazed. They fought back and totally wiped every last one of them out. Ale patched up his wounds and told him to stop going so hard since they were only there to investigate. Chamber totally got what she meant, but he wanted to grind for extra XP just to be safe, since leveling up was their only real chance of surviving if they ran into the Dalton King. Even though there aren't many monsters out during the day, he knew getting spotted would bring a whole army down on them, so he wanted to be ready, and Ailey agreed it was time to level up and crush the Goblin King. They kept pushing deeper into the woods, wrecking every basic goblin that tried to stop them. They finally stumbled onto a campsite that was absolutely covered in goblin tracks. The place was a total wreck, and they started thinking some adventurers might have been jumped right on this spot. Right then, Chamber remembered one last thing the guild manager had told him. An A-rank party just vanished in the Forest of New, so he asked him to go check it out if he gets the chance. When he saw people were actually missing, he realized the other adventurers just dumped this whole mess on him. Right then, he looks down and spots something weird on the ground. And the second she grabbed it, she took one look and realized that was definitely Adelina's earring. She was actually her old party leader and the exact same person who kicked her out of the guild that day. The two of them finally realized that a massive goblin horde must have ambushed her squad right while they were setting up camp. Ailey was determined to push deeper into the forest to find them. And while she felt bad for dragging him into such a risky mess, she knew she had to see this through. Chambers just smirked and told her he already knew she was going to say that. He agreed to help her find Adeline and started tracking the goblin's footprints to see exactly where they were headed. As they're walking, he spots a hand poking out of the bushes, so they move in to get a better look. Their jaws dropped when they saw a massive pile of dead goblins and had no idea what went down, but then they spotted a mysterious blue trail leading them straight to a hidden cave. The cave walls were smeared with blood, and it was pitch black inside, which totally creeped them both out. But Chamber didn't care and pushed right to the front. He used his light magic to summon a glowing ball that lit up the whole area. Ale was totally blown away seeing his magic go off like that again. He figured that even if goblins were hiding in the cave, they wouldn't just jump out since they hate the light. So he shouted out to see if anyone was in there. Suddenly, a voice calls out asking who he is, and it turns out Adelina and her whole squad were actually laying low inside that cave. They looked totally wrecked, so Adele rushed over to see if she was okay and offered to heal her, while Adelina just stood there completely confused about why they even showed up. Ailey just told her to forget about all that and immediately started patching her up with healing magic. Once she finished healing all three of them, Adelina asked her why she was even helping the people who kicked her out so brutally. She just flashed a smile and told them it didn't matter to her at all. She only became an adventurer to help people, and seeing her act like it was so natural left all three of them totally speechless. Adelina laughed at how sweet she was and promised she'd be grateful for this forever. Ale didn't want to act like she was better than everyone, so she quickly said, "Sorry." Adelina promises to buy everyone around once they're safe, so the group starts booking it to get out of the forest ASAP. But right at that moment, one of her guys spotted something. A goblin mage and a couple of regular goblins were just standing there right outside the cave. Even though the monster in the cave was low level, it was a total pain because it could spam magic. And Adelina pointed out that none of them had any long-range moves to fight back. They were supposed to sneak in without getting caught, but before she could even finish her sentence, Ailey just blasted a light arrow and he totally wrecked that goblin mage with just one single hit. The three of them were left totally speechless because they'd never seen her use an actual attack spell before. Chamber mowed down the weaklings while Ale watched his back, and Adelina and the rest kept the pressure on. Her and her whole squad were totally blown away by what they were seeing. These two wiped out every single goblin like it was absolutely nothing. Right then, they both level up, pushing Chamber to level 7 while Ailey hits level 6. They were so hyped, they started dancing on the spot, leaving everyone else just staring in total shock. Everyone was stunned because they'd never seen Ale smile so big. And right then, Adelina realized the Chamber had totally changed him. And honestly, she was low-key happy to see that. Chamber told everyone to follow his lead because he knew exactly how to get them out of the forest. One of the guys spotted even more goblins nearby, and he was totally done with them. So he pulled out his axe to finally get his payback. But right as he was about to swing, suddenly, a mysterious person with strange feet stepped right into the room. He lunged in and sliced through every goblin and the adventurer in a split second, leaving everyone absolutely stunned. This mysterious hooded dude just wrecked the whole goblin squad, and even the bolts were scattered all over the ground. He just bled out and died right there, leaving everyone totally clueless about who he was or what was even going on. Adeline's crew wanted to bail because things were getting sketchy, but she just told him to stop whining like a total baby. She was hoping to avoid a massive fight, but seeing that hooded guy ready with his sword, it was clear he wasn't letting anyone walk away. Their only choice now was to team up and find a way out of there. She told Ale to stay back for support while Chamber stepped up to lead the charge from the front. Finally, she and her buddy Ricardo waited for the perfect chance to strike while Chamber tried to keep his cool by reminding himself he'd leveled up and was way stronger than before. Just like that, the four of them locked in and got into their battle stances. Hale kicks things off by firing a light arrow, but the enemy dodged it like it was nothing, so Chamber rushed in and swung his sword. He's way too fast, and manages to dodge the attack once again. The hooded guy didn't waste a second and swung his sword right back. Chamber somehow managed to block the hit, but the attacks were coming so fast, he knew he couldn't keep it up for long. While the enemy was distracted, Ricardo popped his dash skill and zoomed right at his back. He lands a solid hit, but he just can't pierce through him. That's when he realized the guy was actually wearing armor under that hood. But it was way too late, and the guy stabbed Ricardo with his sword as one last desperate move. Ricardo yanked back the hood to finally see who this person really was. And get this, it was actually a black goblin. He saw just how pitch black it really was. Chamber started to doubt if this thing was even a goblin, but then it suddenly lunged at him, and he barely dodged as it sliced right across his face. Blood was stinging his eyes and blinding him right as the goblin moved in to land the final strike and finish him off. Out of nowhere, a glowing arrow smacks the goblin right in the face. Hale jumped in at the very last second and saved him from getting finished off. The arrow smacked the goblin right in the face, but it didn't even flinch, and now it's locked onto her. The goblin lunged straight for her, while Chamber screamed at the top of his lungs for her to just run. Before she could even process what was happening, the goblin was already lunging right at her face. Right then, Adelina jumps in front and blocks the hit with her sword. But it just wasn't enough, and she still took a nasty hit that left her bleeding. She told him they were finally even, so Ale offered to heal her wounds right then and there. She cut her off because they were out of time, and that Black Goblin was still charging, telling her she needed to stop worrying about everyone else and save her own skin. But before she could even blink, the goblin was right on top of her and ready to finish her off. Chamber snuck up from behind and went for a massive sword strike. His blade couldn't even break the skin, and it barely did any damage, making him feel like he was just punching a solid rock. The goblin scrambled right back to his feet and absolutely blasted Chambers with a massive kick. The hit sent him flying back until he slammed right into a tree. Haley was freaking out for him, but Adelina scrambled to her feet and charged straight at the goblin. She lunged forward, swinging her sword right at him. The goblin blocked the attack like it was nothing, but things were about to get crazy. She kept pushing forward and managed to stab him right in the eye, leaving the goblin screaming in total agony. She laughed right in the goblin's face because she finally found his soft side, but the vibe shifted instantly. But before she can even react, the goblin lunges forward and strikes her in a flash, leaving her completely frozen in shock. Ale asked why she was being so reckless, but she told him her pride as the leader wouldn't let her run away while her friends were getting taken down right in front of her. Ale was just built different, because even after getting kicked out of the squad, she still used her magic to keep everyone alive. They weren't even on the same team anymore, but she used her very last breath to tell her to hurry up and run. The Black Goblin literally sliced her in half right in front of Ale. She was so shocked by what she saw that she couldn't even say a word as she collapsed to her knees. Chamber slowly got back on his feet, realizing this was the one shot Madalena had to stay alive. The goblin was totally distracted by Ale, leaving his left side wide open. And even though he knew he couldn't slice through the monster, he could still aim straight for its head. He launched himself into the air and slammed its head with every bit of strength he had. But then his jaw dropped as his sword snapped right in half. The goblin actually landed a lucky hit and slashed him right across the shoulder. Right then, he noticed weird green flames flickering all over the goblin's sword. The goblin grabs him by the neck and yanks him straight into the air. Chamber couldn't even wrap his head around how a regular goblin was this insanely strong. He really thought he was unstoppable after grinding all those levels. He realized this guy was on a whole different level since he'd already wiped out Adelina's entire squad, and he knew for a fact he was going down next. Then he spots Ale right behind the monster, still on the ground and crying her eyes out. He knew that if he went down now, Il was going to die right along with him. He was totally alone after getting kicked off his team, but she stepped up to join him anyway, and because she trusted him despite barely knowing him, he's now ready to protect her at any cost. He slams his hand onto the goblin's face and blasts a light spell right into its eyes. The flashbang completely blinded the goblin, and while he was busy covering his eyes, Chamber rushed over to Vale and told her to get some backup fast. The goblin couldn't see a thing and just started swinging his sword around like a total maniac. The two of them booked it and finally burst out of the forest. They finally make it back right where the fight is popping off, and he finally made it right to the Adventurer Guild. You could see just how badly both of them had been wrecked. Nako checked in on them and saw he was bleeding like crazy. She begged for help right away, but Chambers told her they had to report back to Surinway first. Right then, Surinme himself walks down the stairs and tells him they're going to talk about it later. First things first, they had to patch up his wounds. Once he was all patched up, Surini led them both to a room where a new guy was waiting for them. This was Dingle, the guildmaster of Rumble, and he told them to just chill out while he explained exactly what was going down. He's pretty sure that Black Goblin they just ran into in the woods is actually being powered up by an evil god. I was the only goddess on the entire continent who could give people skills, but he said that only worked for the humans. Just like humans have a god, every other race has one too, and you'd better believe that includes the monsters. They were known as the wicked gods, and they're the ones that no human would ever dare to worship. He figured that Black Goblin was actually chosen by the monster god Azidahaka, giving him the same crazy powers they had. Hearing that, it all clicked for Chamber, and he finally realized why that goblin was so insanely fast and tough. Dingle straight up told them that the enemy was way too high level for their rank to even handle. Serenity apologized for sending him in blind, but he never expected things to get this crazy, especially since the guild is already calling for backup to handle both the King Goblin and the Black. He promised the guild would handle the rest, and told him it was finally time to call it a day on this mission. Chamber just sat there, feeling like a total failure, even though he really thought he'd finally gotten strong enough to win. He was still way too weak, and his skills were nowhere near ready. He looked over at Ale, who was still shaking like crazy, and he started getting seriously worried because she was totally frozen while her old friends were taken out right in front of her, but he also knew he was totally out of moves for now. But then, out of nowhere, Al actually says sorry to him. He was totally thrown off and had no clue what was going on. She blamed herself for everything, thinking that if she hadn't kept digging for the truth, none of this disaster would have happened. Adelina and her crew would have totally survived if they just stayed hidden in that cave, but she was the one who insisted on pushing forward. She was totally blaming herself for everything, but Chamber stepped in to tell her that none of it was actually her fault. She even said the only reason Adelina got hurt was because she was busy protecting her, and it was all because she was just too useless. As soon as she said that, the whole room just went dead silent for a second. Watching everyone get wrecked just to save her was the final straw, and she cried out that she couldn't let this happen ever again. But then Chamber told her that if she really felt that way about herself, then he was in the exact same boat. He was totally useless in that fight and couldn't do a single thing. Ale told her she was totally wrong since he saved her life 1,000,000 times, and he admitted he feels the exact same way too. He told her straight up that he's only alive because she sniped that black goblin with her light arrow. But for real, she was the one who saved him too. Adventurers are basically living on the edge, knowing that one tiny mistake could end it all in an instant. And that's exactly why they had each other's backs, because that's what being in a squad is all about. He told them straight up that he wanted to be the kind of adventurer who'd risk everything just to keep his friends safe. Haley was totally stunned and couldn't even find the words to say anything. He knew he was way too weak to save anyone right now, so he was desperate to level up and get stronger. He was 100% sure that the two of them were going to get way stronger. Right then, it finally clicked that he had that insane level-up skill. He just looked her right in the eyes and flashed a massive smile. He was totally sure that if he just leveled up, he'd finally be strong enough to take down that black goblin. Ailey also made it super clear that she absolutely hates giving up. She was determined to get stronger so no one else would have to risk their lives just to keep her safe. He saw her clenching her fist and knew exactly what was going through her head. I bet you already know exactly what they were gonna say. Chamber announced they were finally finishing up the investigation request. That was totally not the reaction Serenmi and Dingle were expecting from him. He stood right back up and asked them to give him a brand new quest. Cheronmi asked him straight up what kind of mission he was looking for. Then he straight up told them he was going to hunt down a black goblin. But that was an even bigger shocker. Everyone was totally shook, but Dingle just started cracking up. He loved the energy he was showing them and told them to follow his lead. He pulled out a bunch of keys and started messing with them. Serenu warned him that those keys were a huge deal, but he just brushed it off and told him to keep moving. Chamber asks where they're headed, and he just tells him they're going somewhere totally awesome. They headed straight down into the basement. While Dingle was busy fumbling with all those keys, Suranui told Chamber that they were actually standing in the guild's storage room. Dingle was totally fumbling with the keys, so Surinu jumped in to give him a hand. But he totally snapped and just ripped the lock right off. He starts digging through the storage, but Srinui reminds him that the room is actually packed with super expensive loot. He totally ignored him again and finally found exactly what he was looking for. He walks right out of the dust cloud like it's absolutely nothing. Chamber asked if he was doing okay, and Dingle just handed him a sword. His jaw hit the floor when he saw it was a massive golden great sword. Dingle told him that this weapon was actually called the Thunderblade Thor, and that left him looking even more shocked than before. The second he grabbed that blade, he realized just how crazy heavy it actually was, and it wouldn't even budge an inch. He was totally tripping over the weight, because even though it was the same size as his old sword, it was 10 times heavier. He realized that if he hadn't leveled up yet, he definitely would have dropped it by now. Dingle could tell that thing was way too heavy for him. He explains that this sword belonged to his old partner, a high-rank adventurer who was a total beast until he finally fell in battle. He knew he was toast, but he'd rather go out protecting his friends than hide behind them because that's just how he rolls. This absolute idiot actually took on a dragon solo just to give Dingle and the rest of the squad a chance to escape. Chamber was totally confused and asked him why he was handing over such a legendary sword. Dingle thought back to what he just said. He wanted to be an adventurer who'd risk it all to protect his friends. He even admitted that he looked just like that guy. He patted him on the head and told him not to sweat the small stuff, since this wasn't a freebie. It was just an early payment for the reward he'd get later. Chamber was totally lost and asked him what reward he was even talking about. He told them that Guildmaster Dingle personally hit him up for a major quest to take down some black goblins. A bit later, Chamber and Ale were trekking through a total wasteland. She noticed he was breathing super heavy and asked if he was doing okay. Oh yeah, he did mention earlier that this new sword is super heavy. Dingle basically forced him to master the weapon, and he realized it wasn't just heavy to lift. It carried a ton of pressure too. Either way, he knew he had to get way stronger just to swing that massive blade. And until that happened, he knew there was no way he could take down the black goblins. Exile was totally down with that, and honestly, that's the whole reason they'd traveled this far. He's heading straight into that brutal territory to level up his game. The second he gets there, he's staring down 3 goblin swordsmen right in his face. He was right there, exactly like the info said he'd be. They jump into the fight, and Exile starts things off by blasting a light arrow at one of the goblins, right when the whole group was totally sidetracked. Chamber snuck up behind them and took out a goblin with a single slash. Just one swing showed him how heavy this blade really was, and while he couldn't have even held it before leveling up, that insane weight meant it was going to hit like a total truck. This is where the sword's true power finally kicks in. He suddenly remembered what Dingle told him. This sword is built for pure offense, and its real power only kicks in when you land hit after hit. Thor was this epic sword that blasted out lightning whenever you swung it super fast. The second it gets charged with thunder, it actually becomes way lighter. This gave him a massive boost to move even faster. And just like that, Chamber strikes in a total blur and slices right through another gauntlet swordsman. Every time he swung that thing, it just got even more intense. The more lightning that got packed into the storage, the more its power just kept skyrocketing. He slashes through the final goblin swordsman, and just like that, all 3 are down. Did he really just take them all out? He came charging right at him, land swordsman by himself. He replies that it was actually this new sword, which was, by the way, still crackling. Let's make it one smooth sentence. Out of nowhere, he looks up and sees a massive rock crashing down right on top of them. He snatched Exile up and dove out of the way just in time. At first, it seriously just looked like a boring old rock. Chamber took a closer look at the rock and said it was finally time for them to show up. Turns out, the guy was actually the leader of Dublin. Exile asks if this is their target, and he says totally, because while one goblin swordsman usually leads the pack, a whole group of them means there's a way bigger boss in charge. He'd had Nyako scout out this exact location, and it turns out their guess was 100% right. The Galvan leaders are total beasts, but he knew beating them would give them the massive XP boost they needed to level up fast. So the 2 of them locked in and got ready to face off against the Gotland leader. Exile was still freaking out over how huge the monster was, while Chamber told her to keep it busy so he could get in close. She kicked things off by firing a glowing arrow of light. It slammed right into the leader's eye just as he was about to swing his sword. The monster slams its fist into the ground, forcing the whole group to fall back. Chamber took a quick step back and then lunged straight at it. He missed the killing blow and only managed to slice the skull mask right off the goblin leader's head. It swung its fist, trying to land a massive hit on him. He dodged it just in time and jumped back to figure out his next move. This monster was absolutely massive, and with its crazy reach, he just couldn't find a way to get close. And since that's how things were, he switched things up and started charging a ton of energy into his sword. This was the insane ultimate move Dingle had told him all about. Once that sword hits its max lightning charge, you can blast all that power at the enemy, and Chamber did exactly that. And right as he took a massive swing with his blade, he lunged forward and let all that power explode in one massive hit, and it slammed straight into the goblin leader. The goblin boss got absolutely wrecked. It slammed straight into the ground, totally wiped out. Even Chamber was totally stunned by just how much power that attack actually packed. It was way more than you ever expected. Suddenly, the sword feels like a ton of bricks again, and he remembers Dingle's warning that it would go back to normal once all the lightning was gone. He knew that if he messed up that move, it would end up killing him too. Right at that moment, they both got the level up alert and officially reached level 8. They were both totally stunned when Ailey jumped up 2 levels at once, and he realized that the goblin leader dropped way more XP than he ever expected. They popped open their stat windows to see all the awesome new upgrades they just got. He was shocked to see he'd learned Lesser Heal, but his magic was so low he could only use it once, and it barely did anything to fix him up. But then he looks over at Ailey, and she's totally losing it, screaming that she finally learned the move. She just unlocked a brand new move called Light Javelin. This was the dream move for every priest since it was way more powerful than a light arrow, and she was super hyped to finally level up so she could actually help the team in battle. Chamber saw how hard she was grinding to catch up to everyone else, so he suggested they finally head back to Rumble. They'd already crushed the area boss, so farming weak mobs was a total waste of time, and he didn't want to rush things right from the start. They'd been super stressed out lately, so they really needed a break, and Ale was totally down for it. When he walked back into the guild, everyone's jaws dropped when they found out he actually took down a goblin leader. He pulled out the magic stone he looted from the beast and asked to trade it for some quick cash. Naka was still totally shocked and asked how he took down a Galvan leader at his rank, but he just shrugged and said it was all thanks to their hard work. That work talk totally wasn't what she wanted to hear, so they both just sat down to grab a drink together. Ailey points out that it's been way too long since they last grabbed a drink. She was dying to know what their next move was, now that the goblin leader was finished, but he told her to just trust him because he already had a solid lead on what to do next. He told her to just chill out and enjoy her drink for now. The very next day, the duo heads right back to the exact same spot in the hunting grounds. She asked why they were back, since the goblin leader was already dead, but he told her that was the whole point. Goblins usually stick together in packs, but the leaders never team up because they all want to be the only boss of their own squad. This meant the goblin bosses were always at war, fighting over every single inch of their turf. Basically, the big boss of this area was finally taken down. Then another one pops up, ready to take over even more turf. Suddenly, Chamber caught a sound coming from right behind him. He spun around and saw a goblin leader standing there with a whole squad of goblins. It was going exactly how he thought, but then everything flipped in a split second. Then, out of nowhere, another leader popped up right behind him. He wasn't even shocked to see them all grouped up like that, and honestly, he realized this was the perfect chance to just wipe them all out right then and there. They both went all out with their best moves and totally crushed both goblin bosses and their whole squads. With the fight finally over, Chamber and Ale were still standing strong, and they both officially hit level 12. But back in the city, things are starting to get wild. The whole place was popping off and turning into total chaos. And get this, a bunch of goblins had actually snuck right into the city. Sarah Nui was just chilling in his office when he heard some weird noises outside and wondered what was going down. But Dingle was totally clueless and didn't hear a single thing. Out of nowhere, Narco slams the door open and starts reporting to, from where they stood, that pack of goblins was totally wrecking the streets. Both of them were left completely stunned. Dingle demanded the details, and she explained that while D-rank adventurers were fighting back, a goblin leader was making things a total mess, and we still had no clue why these monsters were even raiding the city. Dingle asked where the high-rank pros were, since D-rankers would get totally wrecked by a Baldwin leader, but she told him it wasn't that easy. Ever since that Black Goblin disaster, all the top-tier pros vanished on other missions, leaving only the average fighters behind, and Dingle was pretty sure they all just bailed before they got stuck dealing with that nightmare. The pros usually smelled trouble coming, but that just meant the only people left in town were a bunch of clueless newbies. He was honestly just fed up and yelled at Suranu to run to the warehouse and grab literally any weapon he could find. Chiranmi asks if he's actually for real, but Dingle tells her to stop arguing because they're in a total emergency. He steps outside and spots a bunch of adventurers clashing with a whole pack of goblins. Suddenly, this one girl steps up and blasts a massive fireball right at the goblin leader, but it didn't even leave a scratch. He was just about to crush her with that massive fist when, out of nowhere, a glowing javelin slams right into the monster's back. Ailey and Chamber finally made it back to town. He was totally confused about why a bunch of goblins were actually running around inside the city. He also spotted a nasty wound on the goblin leader's back that definitely didn't look like it came from an adventurer. Either way, he knew they had to handle this, so he told Ale to finally bust out that new move of hers. She activated her enchant spell and totally supercharged it. He buffed his sword with glowing light energy to make his attacks way stronger. Chamber launched himself straight at them. First, he totally wiped out the two goblin swordsmen standing right there. Every adventurer there was completely blown away by how fast he absolutely destroyed those swordsmen. Dingle was watching him pull out those small gauntlets to charge up his sword with lightning super fast. He was actually blown away by how fast he was already mastering that sword. Chamber went head-to-head with the goblin leader himself. He kicked things off by slicing its leg clean off, and that sent the monster crashing straight to the ground. He launches himself into the air and taps into every bit of electricity stored inside his sword. He drove his blade into the goblin leader and finished him off for good. The entire crowd was left in total shock after he crushed that beast without even breaking a sweat. Wait, what? Everyone was actually hyping him up. Dingle even gave him props for doing an awesome job, and Chamber was totally stoked to hear it. Sir Indy finally comes back, struggling to carry a hammer that's way bigger than he is, and asks what he's supposed to do with it now. A bit later, the whole squad met up in Dingle's office. Back at the office, Chamber explained exactly how his level-up skill worked, and the guy was totally shocked that he'd gained so much power in such a short time. Chamber just nodded, so the guildmaster asked why he was finally revealing his secret skill now. He warned him that he's way too valuable, and if word gets out, some serious troublemakers are definitely going to come looking for him. Chamber just told them he shared the secret because he totally trusts them. Dingle straight up asks him why he trusts them so much. He just told them he had a weird hunch about it. Dingle and Suranu were left totally speechless. He started cracking up because he loved how real the guy was being, and he even bragged that his gut feeling about people was actually pretty spot on. He told them straight up that just looking at the two of them made it impossible to stop thinking about it. Plus, the two of them started acting super shy. Anyway, Dingle asked him what he thought about that goblin leader he just scrapped with in the streets. Goblins are usually total scaredy cats who almost never leave their turf because they're super protective of their space. Chamber was totally down and couldn't stop wondering about the goblin leader's old scars, while Dingle was 100% sure there was a massive secret behind them. He'd never seen anything like this before, so he immediately blamed the Black Goblin since it was the only recent thing that could have caused this mess. Charon called out from the room, asking if he'd seen that Black Goblin attacking anyone else. He confirmed it, so it's pretty clear the Black Goblin doesn't care about his own kind and is just a total psycho attacking everyone in sight. That goblin leader probably lost his turf to the Black Goblin, which is why he ended up invading the city. If that was true, Chamber started thinking those goblins weren't even attacking the town and were actually just trying to run away. Serenity said it's still just a theory, but it could totally be real. Dingle knew they were running out of time before the Black Goblin's influence spread any further, and after hearing that, right then, Chamber and Ailes both shouted at the same time that they had to finish this case right now. A little while later, the two of them finished packing their bags and were totally ready to hit the road. Nyako was super worried and told them to just wait, since backup from the other guilds was only a few days away. Chamber thanked her for caring, but even though this mission was super dangerous, he couldn't just sit around while another attack was coming. Plus, he really wanted to settle the score with that black. They headed out of the guild as Dingle and the crew cheered them on for their big mission. The two of them headed right back into the forest of Noi. And as they keep pushing even deeper inside, they were totally freaked out when they saw the chopped-up body of a cave bow. The magic stone was still there and hadn't been eaten yet, meaning the kill was brand new, and Ale started wondering who could have actually pulled this off. Chamber already had it all figured out, and now he was 100% sure that the Black Goblin was still hiding in the forest. They kept pushing forward and realized they were already super deep in the woods, somewhere totally new that neither of them had ever seen before. Out of nowhere, Ailey spots a massive spider right behind her, and it totally scared the life out of her. But Chamber was way too fast and just sliced that thing clean in half. He quickly asked her if she was doing okay. She was so freaked out she could barely even talk, asking him what that thing was. And he told her it was just a paralyzed spider. It wasn't over yet, because a whole pack was right on top of them, and she realized they'd just walked straight into their territory. He was ready to bolt out of there, but then Ale asked if he also felt like something was seriously wrong with this place. She noticed that even though they've fought tons of monsters in this forest, there hasn't been a single goblin in sight. It hit him right then. Even with the sun out, this place looked like a totally different forest. He knew something was totally wrong, but since they had no other choice, they started creeping forward super carefully. The two of them headed way deeper into the thick forest. Their jaws hit the floor when they realized they'd stumbled right into a massive goblin village. That's why the forest was so empty. Every single goblin was actually hiding right here. They were totally on edge and were actually just laying low inside their tents. So the two of them decided to just hang back and watch for a bit. With the sun about to go down, he told them to finally get some rest, while they took turns keeping watch all night. Later that night, Ale was chilling in his room while the guards stayed on high alert. He looked up and saw the sky lighting up, realizing the sun was finally about to come out. The goblins back at the settlement didn't change one single bit. He was just starting to think watching this place was a total waste of time when out of nowhere, everything changed. Suddenly, he spotted a black goblin slowly creeping toward the area. That black goblin just strolled right through the middle of the village. And then it finally clicked for Chamber that this whole place was his turf all along. Then he saw the other goblins were totally freaked out too, so he rushed to wake Ale up right away. She asked what was going on, so he whispered for her to stay quiet and told her the black goblin had finally shown up. Right then, she spotted that black goblin just wandering right in front of her. She got total goosebumps just thinking about how he absolutely destroyed Adelina and her entire team. Chamber could see her literally shaking from pure terror and asked her if she was doing okay. She told him she was totally fine, but inside, she knew she had to keep her cool and stay focused. They couldn't just keep playing it safe forever. She started to think this black goblin might actually be the big boss of the area. He figured that might be the case, but he just knew it wasn't that simple, and something was definitely off. Suddenly, the black goblin spotted a tiny little runt who was just standing there. It was doing everything it could to stay hidden from him. He just straight up ended it for absolutely no reason. They were both totally frozen in shock, while another goblin tried to sneak away behind his back. He took that guy out too, along with every single one of those annoying little goblins. After seeing that, they immediately started booking it away from him. Both of them just stared at him, totally clueless about the madness unfolding right in front of them. Chamber finally realized why the forest was so empty earlier. Every single goblin was actually hiding from that monster. This black goblin didn't care about family at all, and he saw everyone, humans and monsters alike, as nothing but prey. Al finally realized those busted-up goblins back in Rumble City were actually running for their lives from him. The black goblin was the one behind all this madness, and they knew they had to shut him down for good. As the monster started walking away, the duo ditched their heavy gear and began tailing him in total silence. They stayed right on his tail as he led them deep into the woods. Everyone was dying to know where he was actually going. But out of nowhere, that black goo starts going totally wild. The goblin stops dead in its tracks and whips around, staring them down with a face that's straight up terrifying. They suddenly realized their cover was totally blown. He lunges straight at them, ready to take them both out in a heartbeat. Ale didn't waste a second and launched her light javelin attack, and he sent that monster flying straight back into the trees. Chamber's jaw dropped when he saw just how much power was behind her hit. She knew it was way too early to celebrate because this fight was far from over. Lean, spelled Gauntlin in prompt. It was over, and Black Gauntlin finally pulled back his hood to show he was dead serious now. Wait, the two of them immediately took off and started sprinting away from him. He bolted after them, and Chamber was blown away by how fast he was actually catching up. He wasn't scared at all because his speed was insane after leveling up, and he knew that Goblin would never be able to catch them. They kept sprinting away from him until they finally hit a dead stop and just waited for him to come right after them. The Black Goblin also sensed something was wrong and started looking all over the place. But then, out of nowhere, he accidentally steps right into a sticky spider web. It turns out Chamber was actually using the paralysis spider's territory as a massive trap to stop him dead in his tracks. But obviously it didn't even scratch him, and he just let out one massive swing of his sword. He tore right through every web in his way, and Chamber wasn't even surprised that it didn't slow him down one bit. That tiny distraction was all the opening he needed to finally jump into the fight with his brand new sword. He'd been grinding levels just for this exact moment, and Ile was right there with him, totally ready to get her revenge. He lunged straight for the Black Goblin, ready to finish him off once and for all. Adele fires off a light arrow to distract him, giving Chamber the perfect opening to rush in and strike with his sword. The Goblin totally messed up his block, and the hit slammed right into him. The blade just barely nicked his face, and Chamber was finally starting to find his groove with that sword. He could finally swing it just like his old iron sword, and with its massive weight, plus that enchant light boost, the power was on a whole different level. The guy just stood there totally still, and even though his face was impossible to read, you could tell he was absolutely boiling with rage. The Black Goblin lunged straight at him and started swinging with pure, crazy power. Chamber blocks the attack and remembers that Black Goblins don't actually have any sword skills. They just use raw power and insane speed to crush their enemies. As long as he matched his speed, blocking every hit was a total breeze. And the best part was that those attacks were actually juicing up his sword with electricity, making it way more powerful. With the two of them just kept trading hits back and forth. They're shutting down every single attack their enemy throws. Finally, Chamber got the upper hand and used his raw power to shove the Black Goblin back. Even Al was blown away by that insane power, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down for even a second. Second, the Black Goblin was still keeping his secret trump card hidden away. It's that same green fire that snapped his sword right in half during their last fight. That Black Goblin finally lit up his sword with some crazy green fire. Chamber wasn't even worried because he knew for a fact this sword wouldn't snap like the last one. Thinking fast, he charged straight at the monster and moved faster than you can even blink. He absolutely nailed him with a direct hit. He was totally sure the fight was finally over. He could totally feel the impact as his sword finally landed a solid hit. He looked back and saw the black goblin's entire body totally morphing right in front of him and transformed into a totally new and terrifying monster. Chamber barked at Ile to back off while his mind started racing for a plan. He had no clue what was going on or if the dark god was behind all this madness. He was just standing there trying to figure out his next move when, then, out of nowhere, just like that, the monster vanished right before his eyes. He popped up right in his face and started slashing at him with his claws. He barely blocked the hit, totally shocked by how much faster that black goblin had gotten. Its speed and power just went totally off the charts. Chamber was barely blocking the non-stop attacks as he got shoved back, and he knew he was reaching his breaking point. He tried to jump back and get some space, but he didn't even have time to move. That black goblin was right on top of him, about to crush him with those sharp claws. Just in time, Ale jumps in to save him, blasting a light javelin right into the monster's face. That nerd finally took a second to catch his breath. She warned him to watch his back as the black goblin lunged for another attack. The time chamber actually managed to dodge it. He scrambled back, totally freaked out that his light javelin didn't even leave a scratch on the guy. Al noticed he definitely took some hits though, since his face was already covered in bruises. So she didn't slow down and just kept spamming those light javelins at him. The black goblin was way too fast, dodging every single attack without taking a scratch. Even Chamber couldn't track his crazy movements anymore. It was straight up acting like a wild beast now. With things getting serious, he decided to go full tank mode and told Ale to wait for an opening while he distracted the monster. He charged straight into the action, swinging his sword with zero hesitation. The black goblin dodges the strike and hits him right back. It swings its sharp claws to hit right back. The chamber stopped it right in its tracks. Ale jumped on that opening and hurled another light javelin right at the monster. He kept pushing forward and managed to nick the black goblin, who scrambled back instantly to avoid getting finished off. But then, blood just started pouring out of him. Seeing that got Chamber totally fired up, knowing that if they kept this up, they could finally end the fight for good. Chamber noticed that even with those tricky moves, the guy was getting way too emotional, making his attacks super easy to read. Him and Ale are total beasts, whether they're fighting up close or from way back. They'd been grinding levels together for so long that he could feel they were totally in sync. Thinking they finally had the lead, he charged right back at the monster, and they kept clashing. Ale stayed back and kept firing her light javelin from a distance. It managed to block a few hits, but Chamber just kept the pressure on and wouldn't let up. He finally noticed that they were actually chipping away at it bit by bit. They just had to keep the pressure on while making sure they stayed out of reach. He was totally sure that everything was finally about to end. Then, out of nowhere, it lunged right at his face and went on the attack. He barely blocked the hit right as she was about to strike it with her light javelin. That black goblin spotted her and immediately ducked behind Chamber, using him like a human shield to stay safe. Right then, she caught the black goblin staring her right in the eyes, and she just froze as her mind started racing. If it was actually locking its eyes right on her. Chamber kept hammering away at it, and the second she saw her shot, she hurls her glowing spear straight at the monster. It just blocked the hit with its arm, and it's clear the thing is already learning their moves. Chamber could tell Ale was running out of juice, and he had no idea how much longer they could keep fighting like this. He could see the black goblin was totally running out of steam too. His sword was buzzing with maxed-out lightning, and he poured every last bit of his energy into this final strike. They both charged at each other, ready to throw down. Then, out of nowhere, the black goblin launched himself straight into the air, and he instantly slipped right behind his back. It slammed down right in front of Ali, and right now, she was the one they were actually aiming for. And right now, He's staring straight into that monster's face. She totally freaked out and tried to launch her light javelin attack, but it was already too late, and she didn't even see it coming. The black goblin lunged forward and slashed her with its sharp claws. Chamber screamed her name at the top of his lungs as she crashed down to the ground. The monster snapped its eyes right back onto him and lunged straight at him. He blocked the hit again and was absolutely fuming. He struck back instantly, aiming for a hit that would finish him off for good. He knew he had to take this beast down fast because he couldn't just stand there and watch anymore. He kept the heat on that black goblin and didn't give him a single second to breathe. He saw Ale bleeding out back there, and he was totally losing it. He screamed at her to hurry up and use her healing magic right now. She realized her healing magic just wasn't going to be enough to fix a wound this serious. But she wasn't giving up and reached right for her wand. She pointed it straight at the sky, knowing she still had one last move to make. She blasted a glowing arrow straight into the sky, and that totally caught Chamber's eye. But he had absolutely no clue what she was actually up to. He lost focus for a split second, and that gave the monster the perfect chance to totally take over the fight. It slashes its claws and rips a massive hole right through space. Chamber was totally fuming, so he struck back and landed a clean hit that sliced right down its shoulder. They both froze for a second, and just one look told them everything. He could tell it was finally starting to run out of juice. This was his big chance to stop holding back and go for the total knockout. He swung his sword and let loose all the lightning power he had saved up inside. The black goblin even lit up his claws with some crazy green fire. Right then, Chamber's jaw dropped when he realized it still had one last secret trick hidden away. That didn't even matter anymore. He just had to land a hit before it could. Before he can even swing his sword, the goblin lunges forward and slashes him with its claws. Blood is gushing out of his wounds, and he just can't believe he failed to protect anyone yet again. He was right in the middle of apologizing to Ale for letting her down when out of nowhere, something crazy happened. He picked up on the sound of their voice. Just like that, his health and mana bars shot straight back to max. His body started fixing itself, and he had absolutely no clue what was going on. Suddenly, he spots a dead, paralyzed spider tumbling down from above, and just like that, it finally clicked what had just happened. Back in the paralyzed spider forest, Ale's divine message skill kicks in to show they've hit level 30. And while she checks their XP, Chamber starts calculating exactly. Haley told everyone to keep their experience points as low as possible, just in case something went wrong. If things get messy, they can just level up to get a total HP and MP refill. That way, they'd have a secret weapon ready for whenever things got totally crazy. He told them they wouldn't get any XP without a fight, so they needed a clear spot to hunt small monsters without anyone getting in their way. Ale points out a spot right by the paralyzed spider's nest, and he totally agrees it's the perfect place to pull off their plan. Back in the present, while his body is finally healing up, he's blown away that she actually remembered the plan, even in a crazy spot like that. But he wasn't done yet and scrambled right back to his feet. He snatched up his sword and took a massive swing at the black goblin with everything he had. It got absolutely wrecked as blood started spraying out of its body. But that just made it even more ticked off. It went full beast mode and started lunging at him. But Chamber just dodged every single strike. He even started trash-talking, saying those weak attacks wouldn't land a single hit anymore, right as the goblin tried to jump him one more time. Suddenly, a spear of light slammed right into its back. Ale was back on her feet too, and she was totally healed up. And honestly, Chamber was super hyped to see her, right when that beast tried to turn its focus right toward her. Chamber went on the attack, and even though the monster blocked him, he just wouldn't stop. He kept the pressure on, and then just sliced right through the side. He straight up admitted that staying on his feet after all that was seriously tough. But then He and Ale were standing right next to each other. They finally decided it was time to settle the score for good. Both of them started powering up their biggest moves at the exact same time. The Black Goblin came charging right at them with its claws ready to strike. They team up and let their attacks fly at the exact same time. And it slammed right into him. And then boom, the whole place goes up in a massive explosion. Once the smoke cleared, that monster was straight up gone. And just like that, they finally finished off the Black Goblin. Both of them were totally stunned, unable to believe they actually pulled it off. But they didn't even get a second to celebrate. They snapped back into a fighting stance the second they realized a massive swarm of goblins had them totally surrounded. There were way too many of them, so the two of them started talking it over. That was a massive payout for taking down a black goblin. But Chamber wasn't sweating it at all. It didn't matter how many goblins rushed him, he was going to crush every single one of them now that he'd finally leveled up. But out of nowhere, the ground beneath them started shaking like crazy, and the entire forest was shaking like crazy. They looked up and were totally blown away by what they saw. They look up and see this massive monster staring right down at them. As it got closer, they realized the thing was actually a goblin. But this definitely wasn't your average goblin. It was the King Goblin himself. They were totally stunned when the big boss of the whole settlement showed up right in front of them. It tried to stomp them into the ground and crush them flat. They scrambled out of the way fast, because after seeing that single stomp wreck the ground, they knew one hit meant game over. The King Goblin lunges to snatch them, but Chamber quickly shoves Ale out of the way to keep her safe. He tried to save her, but he's the one who ended up getting caught. He was totally stuck and had absolutely no way to escape its hold. He knew that if things kept going like this, it was game over for him. But out of nowhere, a voice told him to step back because they were taking over from here. In the blink of an eye, the king's head gets sliced clean off his body, and Chamber just went crashing straight to the ground. He was totally blown away to see that Jane was the one who saved him and took down the King Goblin. He was totally stunned that Jane just gave a basic apology for making him wait. Ale dashed over to see if he was okay and offered to heal him up right away. But right then, Jane walks straight up to him and he drops a massive heal spell on him, fixing every single wound in a split second. Ale was totally blown away when she saw the person right in front of her using a super high-level healing spell. They demanded to know who he really was, because he didn't just use that insane extra heal spell, he also wiped out the King Goblin in a single hit. Before Jane could even get a word out, a lady shouted to remind him that there were still some weak monsters lurking nearby. Well, let's go with, this girl's name was Dragwell. Wait, her name was Dragwell. This girl's name was... Jane told the two of them to go get some rest, while her squad handled the rest of those monsters. Chamber was getting pretty annoyed by how stuck up this guy was being, and you can't wait to see what he's got planned. Right then, it finally clicked that this was the backup Nyako promised was coming. He could already tell Jane had leveled up big time, but he needed to see exactly how much stronger he'd really gotten. Jane and Drywell marched right up to the goblins and stood smack in the center of the pack. Right as the monsters lunged in for the kill, he blasted them with a massive chain lightning spell. Then, with a quick snap of his fingers, with just one finger, he zapped every goblin charging his way and fried them to a crisp instantly. The survivors were totally freaking out, but that Drywell wasn't letting them get away. She chucks a tiny bomb right at the guys trying to escape, and a few goblins were still standing, and they lunged straight at Jane to take him down. But Jane just swung his sword once and wiped them all out in a split second like it was nothing. He sheathes his sword and smoothly fixes his hair like a total boss. He shows some heart and says sorry to Chamber again for keeping him waiting. He and Ale just stood there frozen, staring at him and wondering if this guy was actually for real. Chamber tells her where they're actually going, and she totally loses it, saying there's no way that's possible. Later on, the whole crew meets up at a tavern, and Jane mentions it's been a hot minute since he last grabbed a drink with him. Back then, they'd have these totally insane drinking contests, and Chamber remembered he never actually won a single one. He brought up the old days and asked how Martha and Nauru were doing, even though he secretly hoped he'd never have to see them again. Jane told him they broke up the second he left, and honestly, he felt like he never really fit in with them anyway. Drywell was already yelling for another round because she was nowhere near finished. Chamber was totally shocked by her vibe, but Jane told him they were officially teaming up as the New Dawn. Chamber realized he'd picked up a pretty wild teammate, especially when Jane revealed she's actually the dragon priestess who protects the Holy Sword. He kept going, explaining that the Holy Sword chose him as its new master the second he pulled it out, while Chamber's brain was basically melting from all these crazy twists. He thought he was doing big things, but after hearing Jane's stories, he realized his own adventures were basically just low-level goblin hunting. But then Jane stepped in and told him he had it all wrong. He realized he'd become a total beast after taking down the forest-blessed warrior and wrecking a Gotland swordsman. But all that hype actually made him feel a bit shy. He suddenly caught himself and asked Jane if that black goblin was actually just a swordsman buffed by an evil god, and she confirmed that was the case. Chamber finally realized why he didn't get any XP or level up after that crazy fight, but he had to put that aside for now. Jane also pointed out that he wasn't just getting stronger, he was leveling up in every other way too. He realized that after the Rumble Guild heard the whole story, everyone there was basically treating him like a total legend. He'd finally become the guy that everyone was counting on. Chamber started blushing from all the hype, figuring that if this guy was the one saying it, he really must have leveled up. Jane even told him straight up that he needs to start believing in himself more. He set his cup down and told him straight up that they needed to talk. Chamber was totally confused and wondered what he was looking at when Ailes showed up. They all crept up behind him and scared him so bad he practically jumped out of his skin. Turns out she totally failed at drinking again and went straight into her crazy drunk mode. He screams at her to cut it out, but she just keeps pushing him to grab a drink. He turned to Jane and asked what he was going to say, but Jane just smiled at the two of them and said it was nothing. He swore he'd work his tail off to finally reach his level, but Chamber didn't buy it and asked if he was just making fun of him. But seriously, he promised he'd never back down until he was finally strong enough to stand right there by his side. And just like that, the two of them cheered for how much stronger they'd finally become. The next morning, he woke up feeling absolutely wrecked. Sir Enmi could tell the guy had a wild night and tried to apologize, but the manager told him not to worry since they were the heroes who saved Rumble City. Chamber felt bad taking all the credit and made sure to say Jane was the one who actually finished off the King Goblin. But the guild told him that his and Aile's help was still a massive deal to them. But then he stopped playing around and straight up asked them if they were. They were totally ready to ditch this town and get out of there. This left both of them standing there totally clueless. He told them that Dingle was already hooking them up with a letter to get them into the Bulldo Guild. Boulder was way bigger than Rumble, and the monsters there were way stronger, but he was totally sure they could handle it now. He could tell the monsters around Rumble were way too weak to even challenge them anymore. So he asked them one more time if they were ready to ditch this city and move up to the next level. The duo finally made it to the gates of Bulldo's city, but two guards were already standing right in their way. The guard asks if they're adventurers, so Chamber flashes the card he got from Dingle, and since it's the real deal, they're cleared to enter the city. The moment they stepped inside, they were totally stunned by how crazy different this place was from Rumble. The place was massive, and the streets were totally packed with people. He saw tons of crazy new foods he'd never even heard of, and it totally blew his mind. He just knew this city was finally going to give him some wild new experiences, and he had Serenity to thank for the awesome tip. They heard the town was split right in half, with the rich nobles on the east side and a massive wall keeping the commoners away. Chamber guessed the shops on the east side were way better, and Ale was sure all the most talented craftsmen were hanging out there too. He was totally on board, saying they had to hit the east side right away if they wanted to score some gear. But then Ale straight up asked him why he even showed up there. She was totally positive he'd way rather be going with Jane. He admitted he almost teamed up with him, but he knew he'd just end up relying on him way too much, exactly like the old days. He wanted them to level up together at their own speed, and since she was totally down for that, they headed straight for the guild. The second they stepped foot inside the Adventurer Guild, 2 super pretty girls were right there to welcome them. Chamber was totally hypnotized the second he saw them. Ailes just gave a quick cough to snap him back to reality. He got super nervous and totally fumbled his own introduction. She told him to follow her since Dingle had already filled them in on who he was, ever since he was still just a C-rank adventurer. She already had 2 quests lined up and ready for him to jump into, but before he could say yes, she warned him these quests were a massive deal and tied directly to a huge threat Bulldo was facing right now. That totally caught him off guard, so he asked her why they'd trust such a big deal to a complete rookie like him. She just said Dingle told her they were basically immortal on crazy quests, and right then, he started totally roasting the old man in his head. He checked the quests anyway and found jobs about trade caravans getting raided, a creepy monster in northern Boulder, and wyvens snatching people up. He remembered that wyvens were actually known for being absolute monsters in a fight. It creeped them out for a second, but they shook it off and remembered how much stronger they'd become, so they jumped at the chance to test their skills and took the quest right then and there. They finally reached the spot where the merchants got jumped, and he notices the monster-repelling road is totally trashed too. He glanced over at Ale, who looked totally lost and super awkward. He asked what was on her mind, and she told him she totally expected they were finally going to take on the wyvens. He played it off by saying they needed a quick warm-up before taking on the wyven, especially since Suranui warned them this city was way more dangerous than Rumble. Ale started messing with him, asking if he was really that freaked out by the monsters in this city, but he wasn't having it, and kept insisting they had to follow the plan step by step. Suddenly, they hear weird animal noises coming from that wrecked cart sitting right there on the road. He started to wonder if this cart was actually part of the convoy that got jumped, so he peeked inside to see what was making all that noise. This round thing comes rolling out and smacks him straight in the face. It turned out to be some sheep creature, and Chamber was totally fuming after it smacked him right in the face. But Ale, he actually thought it was super adorable. She thought it was the cutest thing ever and was dying to give it some pets. But then she realized something was totally off about it. Chamber warned her that even if it looked super cute, it was still a total monster. She still walked right up to it though, since she could tell it was seriously hurt. It was hurting, so she tried to soothe the beast and promised it that everything was going to be okay. Suddenly, she felt something was off and whipped out her wand in a flash. Suddenly, she hears a weird rustling sound coming straight from the bushes. Chamber stepped up right in front of her, ready to take on whatever was coming. But right then, these massive sheep monsters totally surrounded them. He started wondering if these guys were actually the little kid's friends or something. Everyone's jaw dropped when the monsters started booting it around like it was just a soccer ball. It felt so bad for the little guy and asked them why they were hurting Chan like that. Meanwhile, The whole room was just left wondering what kind of weird name that even was. Suddenly, every single monster turned around and locked their eyes right on them. He realized right then that these were the same monsters that attacked the caravan. They started rushing the duo, so Chamber stepped up to take the lead. Since it was just charging in like a total maniac, he timed it perfectly and landed a massive hit. He swung back and absolutely slammed that monster with a massive hit. It shot backward and bounced through the whole line like a ping-pong ball. Chamber knew something was way off because that hit just didn't feel right at all. Ale gave him major props for wiping everyone out in just one hit, but he started having second thoughts when out of nowhere he noticed something totally crazy was happening to the monsters right in front of him. The outer layer finally started to peel away, and they were both totally blown away by what was hiding inside. Now, the thing had totally turned into a massive bull monster. Chamber just realized that all that fluffy fur totally tanked his attack from before. Every single one of them shed their fur, and he wondered if this was finally their true form. He started thinking their fur armor was totally gone, and they could only take one more hit. So he told Ailey to blast them from a distance to test it out. She hurls her light javelin at one of those monsters, and it gets deleted in a single shot. He was totally right, and now he wasn't scared one bit. He wasn't scared of them anymore, and started wrecking those monsters left and right. Now that he finally figured out how to beat them, these guys weren't even a challenge anymore. Those two just wrecked the whole group and didn't even break a sweat. They checked the cart, and since the rest of the caravan was nowhere to be found, they figured the group must have already bolted back to the city. He told them they should just bail and head back to Boulder City, but that little monster was still there, screaming in pain. Ale rushed right over and used her magic to patch it up. Even with all that magic, Chamber warned her again that the thing was still a total monster. She had to admit he was totally right, but she felt super bad seeing it get jumped by its own kind. Since it looked so different, she knew it probably got picked on all the time. She knew exactly how much it sucked to feel like a total outcast that nobody actually needed. She got super emotional and begged them to keep this one for themselves. He saw the look in her eyes, and honestly, he was totally speechless. He remembered some adventurers could actually tame monsters to fight for them, but you need the Beastmaster skill for that, and neither of these guys had it. The little guy finally healed up and stood back on its feet, staring at him with those big eyes, while the system flagged it as a super rare find. He gave him the choice to bring it along as his new sidekick. He was totally freaked out by the message, but the sheep just kept staring at him with those big sparkly eyes, looking super hyped and waiting for him to finally do something. He knew there was no way a regular guy like him should have this power without the monster tamer skill. He knew better than anyone that it was totally useless to expect his level-up skill to follow any normal rules. He's really questioning if he should trust a monster as his teammate, but then he caught the sheep looking right at him with a massive, bright smile. Meanwhile, Ale was doing the exact same thing. He totally threw in the towel and just decided to take it in. He slammed that confirm button, and just like that, the rare angry sheep joined his squad, making Ale super hyped. The system kept spamming him that this was a unique species, making Ale realize this was totally different from the Dark God's blessing, and when it asked for a name, he was dead set on calling it Mai-chan. He didn't even fight her on it, just locked in the name and immediately popped open the stats window. And honestly, its stats were looking pretty insane for a monster. Even though it's only level 1, its HP is totally insane, and he realizes this monster would actually make a perfect tank. Anyway, he walks right up to her and greets her with a handshake. And honestly, that made me feel super hyped too. With everything wrapped up, the crew finally started making their way back to the guild. He headed back to the guild and told the receptionist exactly how a mob of angry sheep totally ambushed the merchant caravan. She spotted the creature right next to him and asked if that little monster was officially tagging along, but he started freaking out because he had zero clue how to explain why he was lugging a monster around with him. He didn't even get a word out before she suddenly asked if he was actually a monster tamer too. He couldn't think of a better lie, so he just nodded and played along. And that's when she handed him a ring. That's the tainting ring, the sign that the monster is tamed, and Ale thought Mai looked super cute with it on. Then she tells him he's got to pay for the ring, and he's not even surprised she's charging him for that too. He finally heads out of the guild, and as they walk through the streets, tells everyone they should just head back to the inn for now. Ale was really starting to doubt if things could ever go back to normal now that Mai was officially part of the squad. He figured they were all set now that they had the taming ring, and even if it didn't work out, this city was huge enough to just go find another one. So after getting rejected by a ton of different places, finally this old guy stepped up and agreed to take them in. The place was a total dump, and they felt super awkward, but hey, at least they finally had a spot to crash. After crashing there for the night, it was finally time for me to start training, and they suddenly spotted a wild deer out in the fields. He figured this was the perfect opponent to test Mei's skills, so he asked her if she was ready to go. She started shaking her head, looking totally terrified of that deer. He couldn't figure out why she was so freaked out, since a wild deer is way weaker than a super mad sheep. He asked her straight up if she wasn't embarrassed to be so scared of someone way weaker than her. Then he tried to shove her right into the action to get her moving. Right as he's doing that, she suddenly slips and starts tumbling all the way down the hill, charging straight for the wild deer. The deer thought she was starting a fight, so it went into full attack mode. He flips her high into the air like she's nothing but a ball. Chamber and Ailey realized they couldn't just watch anymore and had to jump into the action right now. And right when they were about to make their move, he looked up and saw me falling right out of the sky. She slammed into the ground so hard that a massive cloud of dust exploded everywhere. Once the smoke finally cleared away, she actually landed right on top of the deer and took it out before she even knew what happened. They were both totally stunned, because while the wild deer was down for the count, Mei was just standing there like it was no big deal. He couldn't believe his eyes when she took a direct hit from a wild deer like it was absolutely nothing. She totally lucked out to get the win, but man, her tank skills are seriously insane. And that just proved Chambers' gut feeling was totally spot on. She could be an absolute beast of a tank. She just needs to find that fighting spirit and get her head in the game. They headed toward the next enemy, but Hale was getting nervous and asked if Mike could really take this guy on by himself. He told her she had to handle this one solo so she could finally start believing in herself. Plus, she was only up against a slime, and everyone knows those are the absolute weakest monsters in the world. He wanted her to feel like a total boss, so he made her fight the weakest, most pathetic monster ever. She was super nervous at first, but once she saw how it reacted to her touch, she started poking it over and over. Even Chamber was totally lost and had zero clue what she was trying to pull off. But right then, the slime totally lost its cool. The monster lunged straight at her, making both him and Ale freak out for her safety. But once again, she's just standing there acting like it was absolutely nothing. Chamber was totally shocked that she didn't even flinch after taking a massive body slam, even if it was just from a slime. With that thing stuck to her, she started spinning like crazy and hurled it right off. She just charges straight at it and tackles the slime head-on, smashing it right into a rock until it totally splatters. She finally found her spark and started laughing with total confidence. Chamber started to wonder if she was actually just a bully who liked picking on people weaker than her. Once she finally got her confidence back, she started leveling up at an insane speed. She went head-to-head with a whole mob of monsters, even though she needed way more XP to level up than the other two. Her boosts were insane, and with her massive health and damage reduction, she was turning into a total tank. Once they got back to the city, even the guards were totally hyped to see her. He checked in on her to see how she was doing and offered her a hand. She gave them a cucumber snack, and it turns out they totally obsessed over her. But they weren't the only ones, because basically the whole town loved her and kept hooking her up with all kinds of snacks. She was basically a total superstar in Bulldo by now. Usually, tame mares walk around with these huge, scary-looking beasts, but May is so cute and friendly that she totally stands out, and everyone just adores her. Whenever they're in town, once night fell, the crew headed straight for a tavern. Ale was hyped to see the team finally clicking, and Chamber was stoked that Maya was holding her own exactly like he'd planned. With the squad finally geared up, he decided it was time to jump into that quest and take on the wyvens. Meanwhile, way over in the southwest mountains of Bulldo, we're deep inside a cave. A bunch of tiny creatures were bolting away like they were running for their lives from something scary. Turns out, there was a straight-up dragon hiding inside that cave. Then a shady guy in a hood started walking right up to it. The dragon just blasted him with a massive wave of fire, but the guy just dodged it like it was nothing. He came crashing down and landed right on top of its head. He stabbed it right in the face and took that dragon down in a split second, with the dragon's massive body finally slumped lifeless on the ground. Out of nowhere, its eyes glowed again, and it snapped right back to life. Now we're jumping back to the room where the drinks are flowing. They kept right on moving, still hunting for the weaver. She could see that Mai was totally starting to run out of gas. They hadn't caught a break in forever, so he checked in to see if Yazdale was actually doing okay. She told him she was totally fine because her stamina got a massive boost from leveling up. He figured Maya was exhausted because her level was so low, so he suggested forcing her to level up to fix her, which totally freaked Al out. He was totally messing with them, so they decided to just chill and take a break right there. She saw him totally zoning out and asked him what was on his mind. He pointed out how weird it was that they hadn't run into any monsters on this road yet. Once he pointed it out, she realized this silence felt exactly like that time in the forest of Noi, but he told her to stop stressing about it, and they both took a second to chill. A bit later, they were finally all set to head out. Out of nowhere, a massive scream from the mountains echoed right into Chamber's ears. Something was coming right off the mountaintop, and they were starting to wonder if it was actually a wyven. It sounded like pure pain, almost like a totally heartbroken cry. He could tell right away that something totally weird had just gone down. The three of them decided to tail it and see what was really going down. They keep pushing forward, heading straight into the action. They were trekking through the mountains when they ran right into a panther named Leo. Chamber was totally confused to see a panther Leo show up, especially since these mountains were only supposed to have weak, low-level monsters. The place was totally empty until now, so he was completely stunned when a C-rank monster suddenly appeared right in front of him. But then he finally stepped up to the challenge. She was locked in and ready to throw down with the panther Leo. He was so proud to see her charging straight into the front lines all on her own. He gave her a massive boost from behind, and as she lunged forward, Leo the panther tried to strike back. It tried to fight back, but she beat it to the punch and tackled it straight into the wall. Chamber was actually blown away by how brutal that slam was. He and Ale stayed right there, making sure they had her back. Once the fight was finally over, he gave me major props for being so brave. He was blown away by her insane defense skill since she tanked the panther Leo's claws like a pro, and just as he realized she'd be the perfect teammate, he suddenly, he heard that sweet, level-up voice ringing in his ears. He leveled up and unlocked a massive skill that buffs his entire squad. He had no clue what this new skill was, but suddenly a screen popped up asking him to pick a teammate to buff the whole squad. He had no idea what would happen, so he decided to be the test subject and clicked his own name. Out of nowhere, this crazy bright light just totally swallowed him up. He could tell right away that this light felt totally different. This felt way different than a normal level up, and he could feel his body getting super light. Suddenly, a monster pops up right behind him, and he thinks it's the perfect chance to take his new power for a spin. He laughed right in the monster's face and told it to bring it on, and it started lunging at him with those sharp needle hands. He dodged every single attack like it was nothing because he felt so light, and he could tell his whole body was way stronger now too. The monster blasted off into the sky, and since he felt so light, he wondered if he could actually fly a bit too. Turns out he really could do it once he finally came face to face with that monster. He leapt into the air and sliced it right in half, ending it once and for all. Right after that, he decided to test out this new feature on Exile too. The second he picked her name, she started glowing bright green and felt a crazy surge of power, just in time for a monster to show up for her to test it out. And the second, she hurls that light javelin straight at it. Its power was totally off the charts, and she was left speechless when it one-shotted the monster and blew up the second it hit. Chamber realized this feature was basically a massive power boost for everyone, and he started wondering what would happen if he used it on himself too. Suddenly, Ailey spotted something sketchy at the mountain peak and realized there might be something way worse than wyverns waiting for them. He prayed he was wrong, but he knew they had to be ready for a total war, just like that insane fight against the black goblins. Ailey was starting to get a really bad feeling about this. He promised her that with this crew, they could totally take down a wyvern, and if things got too sketchy, they'd just bail back to the city. So Ailey agreed, and they planned to hit the summit the next morning. The next day, the three of them hiked up the mountain and were just about to hit the very top. Another panther, Leo, popped up right in their path, but when he got a closer look, he realized this thing was totally different from the last one because it had two heads. He decided to go full power because even though he was saving his energy for the wyvern, he knew this beast was way too dangerous to hold back against. Ailey charged up his sword with a blast of pure light magic. He sprinted right at that crazy two-headed panther, but out of nowhere, he gets totally cut off before he can even make a move. Out of nowhere, something just snatched the panther, and he took it down in the blink of an eye. Out of nowhere, a massive black wyvern appeared right in their faces. Neither of these guys had ever even heard of a pitch-black wyvern before. He figured this was another special case, just like mine. He started wondering if this was just like that black goblin who was blessed by a creepy, evil god. Haley didn't even want to think about it, but it was totally possible. And one thing was for sure, this monster was definitely not normal. So they decided to go all out and throw everything they had at it. The wyvern shot straight into the air and was just about to dive down for the kill. It just starts roasting them with a massive blast of fire. Ailey told Chamber to hook her up with that party boost. The wyvern just blasted them with a massive wave of fire. The whole place was swallowed by fire, and once it finally stopped, turns out she saved everyone by throwing up a massive magic shield around them. Chamber's jaw hit the floor, and even she was shocked it actually held up, since magic barriers usually shatter under that much power. And finally, they only pulled that off because they used the party boost technique. Now, it was finally time for them to strike back and show what they were made of. She hurls a spear of pure light straight at it. He nailed the wyvern with a perfect hit, even while it was flying way up in the air. That javelin ripped right through one of its wings. That wasn't enough to make it crash, but it started sinking and hovering near the ground, since it couldn't really fly right anymore. Chamber suddenly had a great idea and looked over at May, asking her to back him up. He started by using a party boost on her to supercharge her physical defense skill. Then he starts swinging his sword around to charge it up with massive lightning. I leaped into the air, aiming to smash her with my powered-up sword. Her magic barrier let her tank those lightning strikes like it was nothing. And right then, he swung his sword with everything he had. He lands a massive home run hit and sends her flying through the air like a ball. He ended up calling this move the light cannonball. It slammed right into the stumbling monster's face and sent it crashing to the ground. Haley calls him out, asking if he's really taking those half-joking ideas she mentioned while they were drinking that seriously. He thought that was a genius move and admitted he'd actually been low-key practicing it with Mai for a while now. But none of that mattered because the fight was far from over, and he wasn't about to let that monster catch its breath. He bolted straight toward it with everything he had, and right when that monster lunged straight for him, he slipped past the attack and got right in its face. He jammed his blade into the busted wing and totally shredded it. He's making sure that thing never takes flight again. But then the black wyvern started changing as these crazy patterns broke out all over its body. Chamber was totally freaked out when those glowing green patterns started spreading all over its body. He suddenly realized this monster was exactly like the black goblin he fought before. Those patterns were a total match for the ones he saw on that goblin. He didn't care if this guy was a blessing bearer or whatever. He just leaped into the air to end the fight right then and there. He landed a perfect hit, but his sword just bounced right off like it was nothing, and he was left standing there, totally speechless. His body was totally stiffening up while he scrambled to figure out his next move. The monster whipped its tail around, trying to smash him. But right then, May jumps in the way to save him, even though he totally didn't want her getting hurt. He yanked her out of the way just in time, but he ended up taking the hit himself. At least both of them were still breathing. Ailey dashed over to his side and started healing him right away. He thanked her for worrying, but told her it was no use because that wyvern's tail was packed with poison. Her healing wasn't going to fix the poison already inside him, so he had to take that thing down before it spread, even though Hale had no clue how they'd even scratch those rock. But Chamberhead's got a plan, and he wants me to tag along. He told Ali to provide backup from a distance while the two of them charged straight at the black wyvern. This was their one last shot to end this once and for all. He kept slipping past every single strike it threw at him. That monster started charging up a massive fire blast to take him out. Ale shut that down instantly and blasted a spear of light right into its face. The poison was starting to hit Chamber hard and making his head spin, so he knew he had to move fast while he still had the chance. But there was no way he could pull this off by himself. He tells May to just launch him right into the action. Her fur was like a giant cushion that sent him bouncing way up into the sky. He finally spotted the exact place he'd been hunting for this whole time. He spotted a gash on its head, and even though its whole body was armored up now, he knew that had to be the weak spot. So he finally let loose, blasting out every bit of power he'd been saving in his sword. And he just jammed it straight into its head. That black wyvern was straight up cooked, and he actually pulled it off and totally crushed it. Chamber was out of time, because the poison had already spread through his whole body. Right then, a notification popped up saying all three of them leveled up and were totally healed. Ailey was super worried and shouted out to see if he was actually okay. He popped back up like it was nothing and flashed a thumbs up to show the poison was totally gone. They were stoked to hear that. And since black wyverns are super rare, he wanted to sell every bit of loot they found. But Ailey pointed out it was way too much to carry, and he totally agreed. He headed back to town, hoping that most of those monsters had cleared out by now. But out of nowhere, he sensed that mysterious guy in the cloak was lurking nearby. And for real, it sent a massive shiver straight through his whole body. He looked around for the source of that creepy vibe, wondering if it was another person blessed by that evil god. He didn't have a second to waste and yelled for everyone to stay alert. But before he could even blink, this guy literally stopped him mid-chase with nothing but his bare hands. The guy was actually bummed that it was that easy to finish him off. Ailey watched in total horror as Chamber's blood sprayed all over the place.